Good evening, listeners. Tonight, we take a journey back in time. A simple story about how Victorian families bed set for the evening. And so, it begins. The afternoon wanes with a quiet insistence that seems to slip into every corner of the house. Outside the tall parlor windows, the sky has softened to the color of pale linen, dimming slowly as the sun eases its way behind the chimney pots. From the cobbled street below, there comes the muted sound of hooves on stone, each measured step marking the passing of the day. The lamplighter makes his steady way along the road, moving from one post to the next with his long iron pole. The small flame at the tip flares to life, catching in the glass globes of the lamps, casting pools of gentle gold upon the pavement. Each lamp flickers once, twice, then steadies into a patient glow. They will watch over the street until dawn returns. Inside, the hush is deeper. The walls themselves seem to listen. The parlor is still. On the hearth, the coal fire has subsided into a low, pulsing glow. Near the window, the mother sits in her chair with her mending laid across her lap. Her needle moves in slow, deliberate strokes, the thread catching in the dimming light. At her feet, the youngest child sits cross-legged, a cloth doll resting in her lap. She strokes the doll's yarn hair with the tip of one finger, over and over, a private gesture of comfort. In the far corner of the room, the father folds his newspaper with a rustle that sounds unusually loud in the hush. He smooths the creases, aligning the edges with a precision that feels like an act of respect for the day's news. He sets the folded pages aside, resting one hand on the arm of his chair as he studies the hearth. The glow from the coals catches in the lines around his eyes, in the silver threads at his temples. For a long moment, he simply breathes, taking in the comforting sameness of the evening hour. Upstairs, the older children have retreated to their small tasks. One kneels by the window, watching the lamplighter's progress down the street. Another tidies the books stacked along the windowsill, aligning them in neat rows as the last light slides away from the spines. The air in the bedrooms is cool, edged with the dampness of approaching night. The bed covers are turned down already, exposing crisp linen sheets that smell faintly of sun and lavender water. The maid moves silently between the rooms, her slippers soundless against the floorboards. She carries a brass candlestick, the flame steady despite her careful steps. In each room, she draws the heavy curtains across the glass, smoothing them with a hand that lingers on the fabric's faded pattern of roses. She checks the window latches, testing them one by one. With each small click, the outside world is sealed away a little further. Back in the parlor, the mother ties off her last stitch, biting the thread close to the fabric. She sets her work aside, folding the mending into a neat square before slipping it into her basket. The father rises, crossing to the window where the curtain waits to be drawn. He pulls the heavy fabric across the glass with a slow motion, the pleats gathering like the folds of a dark sea. The faint glow of the lamplighter's progress still flickers at the edges, but soon it too is hidden. He lets the curtain settle, then draws the tie back across to hold it in place. The little girl by her mother's chair watches all this with the solemn patience of a child who has learned that night comes whether you wish it or not. The world beyond the windows is folded away, leaving only the quiet company of family, the steady tick of the clock, and the familiar hush of the house preparing for rest. The house receives the darkness as a guest it has known all its life. It is not unwelcome, only inevitable. In the front hallway, the father moves along the runner with a deliberate gait, pausing to touch the polished banister, as though to remind himself that the wood is still there beneath his palm. The last traces of daylight are giving themselves over to dusk, the boundaries of each object blurring into shadow. In the parlor, the mother has begun her evening ritual. She stands by the broad windows that look onto the street, the damask curtains in her hands. She does not hurry. Her gaze lingers on the pale glow of the last lamp being lit outside, the lamplighter's silhouette already merging with the dusk. For a moment, she watches the halo spreading across the pavement, catching in the puddles left by the afternoon rain. There is something reassuring about it, a sign that the world is cared for even when it disappears into darkness. She draws the curtains closed, one side pulled slowly to meet the other. The heavy fabric falls into place with a hush that seems almost to echo. With a practiced hand, she smoothed the pleats into even folds. The tie-backs are looped carefully, the tassels adjusted until they hang straight. She takes a moment to look at the way the light from the lamp settles on the patterned weave of the curtain, making it glow from within. Then, satisfied, she steps back. The father re-enters, carrying the lamp to the sideboard. He sets it down among the delicate clutter, porcelain figurines, a small clock, a pressed flower arrangement under glass. The flame reflects in the polished wood and in the glass cabinet doors, multiplying itself into tiny glimmers that seem to breathe. He straightens a stack of papers and closes the lid of a wooden box where bills are kept. At the far end of the room, the children watch without speaking. Their eyes follow every movement, each familiar step in a sequence they know by heart. One of them holds a toy soldier whose paint has worn away along the edges. She rubs the flat of her thumb across the faded red jacket, then sets the toy gently on the arm of a chair. Even their play has grown subdued, as if the coming of night has softened every impulse. In the master bedroom, she checks the fire laid in the grate, the small pyramid of coal waiting to be kindled. She brushes a bit of ash from the hearthstone with her apron and moves on. Back in the parlor, the mother opens the drawer of the side table and withdraws her embroidery hoop. She sets it in her lap, but does not yet take up her needle. For a time, she only sits, listening to the deep quiet that has gathered around them. The fire in the hearth has shrunk to a bed of embers. The heat that remains is a low, steady presence, filling the air with a drowsy warmth. The faint scent of coal smoke lingers in the curtains, familiar and comforting. The father lowers himself into his chair, leaning back until the wooden frame creaks softly. His gaze travels from the dark window to the clock on the mantel, watching the slow sweep of the minute hand. Each tick is a small declaration that the day is closing its doors. He closes his eyes and draws a breath, letting it out in a long measured sigh. On the rug near the hearth, the youngest child lies on her stomach, her cheek resting on folded arms. Her eyes flutter open and closed, as though she is caught between two worlds. Now and then, she lifts her head to be sure her parents are still there. Each time, she finds them unchanged, as solid as the furniture and the walls around them. Her head settles again, her breath slowing. The mother at last threads her needle, her fingers steady in the lamplight. She begins to stitch, the small silver point rising and falling in patient rhythm. The cloth draws closer to completion, one petal at a time. She thinks how many evenings she has sat just so, How many years have passed in rooms like this, with the curtains drawn and the night close at hand? The knowledge soothes her, the repetition an assurance that life's pattern will hold. From the kitchen comes the muffled clink of cups being washed and set to dry. The maid moves carefully, making as little sound as possible. Soon she will extinguish the kitchen lamp and ascend the stairs, leaving the lower rooms in darkness. But for now, the parlour remains alight, a small island of warmth in the sea of night. The father opens his eyes and glances at his wife. She does not look up from her sewing, but he feels her awareness, a quiet bond that does not require words. In the stillness, they are both content to sit, to listen to the clock's slow counting, to feel the house settling deeper into its rest. A small drift of coal settles in the grate with a sound like a sigh. The fire's glow has diminished, but its presence is no less comforting for that. The mother sets her embroidery aside. She folds the cloth in half, then in half again, smoothing the edges with her palms. The hoop is lifted free and placed gently in her sewing basket, as if to avoid disturbing the piece that has wrapped itself around the room. She glances over the table beside her, straightening the pile of letters waiting to be answered. A visiting card is tucked beneath the inkstand, its neat copperplate script glinting faintly. She does not reach for it. There is time enough tomorrow for correspondence. Tonight, there is only this small world, enclosed and safe. On the opposite side of the hearth, the father reaches for the poker. He nudges the embers with careful precision, coaxing a fresh flicker of flame along one side of the coal. A thin wisp of smoke curls upward, bright in the lamplight, before disappearing into the chimney's throat. He adds a single new piece of coal, laying it in place as though it was something fragile. The fire accepts it with a muted crackle. No urgency, no sudden flare. Only the quiet promise of warmth that will last until bedtime. The children have drifted into the familiar pattern of evening chores. One gathers the stray toys left on the rug, arranging them in a shallow basket lined with scraps of cloth. The painted wooden horse is set carefully atop the others, its wheels aligned, its faded blue saddle turned outward as if it might be admired, even while at rest. Another child carries two small books to the corner cabinet, sliding them onto the shelf with the solemn attention reserved for important tasks. Each motion is slow, deliberate, part of a ritual they have performed so often that it feels like instinct. In the kitchen, the maid fills a copper kettle and sets it over the remaining heat of the range. The water begins its slow ascent to a simmer, a soft prelude to the making of evening tea. She moves between the pantry and the sideboard, collecting cups and saucers, the sugar bowl, the small jug of milk. Her footfalls are measured, almost soundless against the worn floorboards. Now and then she pauses, listening for the chime of the clock or the muffled voices in the parlour. She knows how to read the household's rhythms, how to measure her own pace so that nothing feels rushed or unattended. A light patter of rain has begun against the window glass, so fine it seems more a caress than a storm. The sound threads itself into the quiet, a delicate accompaniment to the clock in the fire. When the kettle begins its quiet hiss, the maid carries it carefully into the parlour. The rising steam is fragrant and comforting, a warmth that mingles with the faint coal smoke and the lavender that clings to the curtains. The mother lifts the teapot and begins to pour. The amber liquid fills each cup. a gentle current that seems almost to carry away the last of the day's cares. She adds milk to the children's cups, stirring each with 3 slow rotations of the spoon. The father accepts his cup with a quiet nod, his other hand resting on the arm of his chair as though to anchor him in this moment. No one feels the need to speak. The act of tea, pouring, stirring, sipping, is its own conversation. Outside, the rain has grown softer still, a fine veil that drapes itself over the sleeping street. The father stirs the embers one final time, ensuring the fire will hold its glow. He does not add more coal. It is enough to last the remaining hours. The children remain on the rug, leaning against each other in a quiet tangle of limbs and drowsy sighs. Their eyes drift closed in turns, only to open again, as if they are reluctant to surrender the comfort of the evening. The house has been prepared for night. The hour grows later, though time itself seems to drift more slowly now, drawn out in long, quiet stretches of ritual and rest. In the kitchen, the maid has begun her preparations for the evening meal, moving among cupboards and shelves with the familiar assurance of one who has tended to the same tasks, in the same house, through many seasons. The soft clatter of dishes being laid out is muffled by the thick curtains that enclose the parlor, but the family hears it all the same, a comforting sign that the final business of the day is underway. The supper is not elaborate, for the evening calls for simplicity. On a long oak table, the linen cloth is spread smooth, each corner adjusted so that it falls in a perfect square. Candles are set at intervals down the center, their tapers pale against the dark wood. They remain unlit for now, standing like slender sentinels waiting to fulfill their purpose. The plates are arranged in a quiet procession, blue and white patterns gleaming under the steady lamp that hangs from the kitchen ceiling. In the scullery, water is drawn from the hand pump, the iron handle creaking with each stroke. The maid fills a basin, lowering the vegetables into its cool depths. A potato brush is lifted, then set aside again, each movement considered rather than rushed. She has learned over time that the quality of the evening depends not only on what is prepared, but on the calm with which it is done. A hurried hand can unsettle a house as surely as a sharp word. And so, she moves at the pace the house itself seems to prefer, unhurried, attentive, as if each moment deserves its own respect. Beyond the kitchen door, the hallway is quiet. The father lingers near the sideboard, observing the slow ritual of preparation. He does not speak, but now and then he lifts his watch from his waistcoat pocket, glancing at the time as though to measure not the minutes, but the gentle decline of the day. The mother has joined him, her hands folded in front of her. The father lifts a candle from the table and strikes a match. The flame flares, then steadies, its reflection flickering in the polished handles of the cutlery. One by one, the other candles are lit, each new point of light joining the last in a slow illumination of the room. The shadows shift and soften, retreating into the corners where they will wait patiently for the flames to die away. The table takes on a quiet splendor, simple, unpretentious, but glowing with the dignity of care. The maid emerges from the scullery, carrying a shallow bowl of steaming potatoes. Their skins split to reveal the pale softness within. She sets it on the sideboard, then returns for the covered dish of cold meats, the small plate of pickles, the fresh loaf of bread wrapped in a clean cloth. Each is arranged with thoughtful precision, as if the very placement of the food might offer comfort. When everything is in its place, she steps back, her hands folded in her apron. The mother nods her thanks, and the maid slips away to tend the final chores that will close her day. The family gathers without summons. One by one, they draw up chairs, the legs scraping gently over the flagstone floor. The father takes his place at the head of the table, resting one hand on the back of his chair before sitting. The mother settles opposite, the children flanking her on either side. For a moment, no one moves. They only sit in the warm light of the candles, breathing in the mingled fragrances of bread and fire and the faint sweetness of the late autumn air that has followed them in from the hallway. The father bows his head, his voice low as he offers thanks. The words are not hurried. They fall into the quiet like small stones into still water, sending ripples of meaning that linger even after the prayer has ended. When he lifts his gaze, he meets the eyes of each child in turn. The youngest ducks her head, smiling shyly. The others return his look with the steady composure of those who have heard these blessings every evening of their lives. Plates are filled with measured portions, the serving spoon moving from hand to hand. The bread is broken and passed along, the crust crisp under tentative fingers. The children eat with the solemn attentiveness that comes when weariness has already begun to dull the edges of hunger. No one feels compelled to speak more than necessary. A question about the morning's lessons is asked and answered in murmured tones. A soft laugh follows when the youngest child yawns so widely that her spoon slips from her grasp. The father retrieves it without reproach, dabbing the spot on the cloth with a corner of his napkin. The meal proceeds at the pace of evening itself, slow, inevitable, and gentle. The candles burn steadily, their flames so still they seem to be holding their breath. The room has settled into an ease that no sudden sound or motion could disturb. Even the ticking of the clock feels less insistent here, softened by the nearness of family and the sure knowledge that the day is nearly done. When the plates are cleared, they are stacked with care, each cup and saucer balanced just so. The mother stands, lifting the tray with practiced hands. The father rises to draw the chairs back from the table, aligning them in a straight, respectful line. The children linger a moment longer, their faces turned to the candles, as if reluctant to leave the gentle circle of their light. The last crumbs are brushed away, the linen folded, the final small gestures that signal the meal has ended. And in the calm that follows, the family prepares to move on to the last rituals of the night, each step guided by a patience as deep as the hush that has settled over the house. The supper table stands empty now, its linens folded in careful squares, the chairs pushed neatly into place. The candles still burn along the center, their small flames steady, as though they mean to keep watch until the last family member has turned in. The light they cast is softer than before, mellowed by the hour and the nearness of sleep. In that glow, the evening's final tasks unfold with a quiet thoroughness that feels as necessary as breath. The father begins the circuit of the downstairs rooms. He moves without haste, pausing in each doorway as though to take a mental inventory of all that has been set in order. In the front hall, he tests the latch of the door, lifting and lowering it to be certain it holds. The bolt slides home with a muted click. He rests his palm flat against the wood, not in suspicion, but in respect. The door has served them well through many seasons, keeping the warmth in, the night air out. The the small world of the family safe and undisturbed. In the sitting room, he lifts the lamp from the mantel and carries it to the writing desk. The polished surface gleams softly, reflecting the brass inkstand, the orderly row of envelopes addressed in his wife's careful hand. He picks up one of the letters and reads the name written across the front, his thumb brushing over the looping script. For a moment, he thinks of the friend it will reach in the coming days, the distance the paper must travel, by coach and train before it is unfolded in another lamplit room. He sets it back in place, aligning the corners with a small nod of satisfaction. He checks the tall clock next, drawing the brass key from his waistcoat pocket. The winding is done with slow deliberation, each turn of the mechanism accompanied by the soft ratchet of hidden gears. The clock's face is pale in the low light, the black numerals clear and certain. When he is done, he closes the glass door over the pendulum, watching it sway once, twice, before settling into its measured arc. The ticking resumes, calm, precise, reassuring. In the kitchen, the mother and the maid share the quiet work of restoring the room to order. Plates are washed in warm water, each one turned and rinsed until it shines. The cloths are wrung out and hung neatly to dry, their clean scent rising into the cool air. The maid sweeps a few stray crumbs into the dustpan and empties it into the stove. The small snap of the iron door closing is the loudest sound in the room, and even that seems to dissolve almost as soon as it is heard. The mother dries her hands on the edge of her apron. She moves to the pantry to measure out a scoop of flour, checking the level in the bin with a thoughtful gaze. The next day's bread will need to be started early. The thought is noted, set aside. Tomorrow can bring its own concerns. Tonight, there is only the comfort of tasks completed and the nearness of rest. The children are gathered near the hearth, their voices lowered to a whisper. One cradles a book, the other leans over her shoulder to see the illustrations. They trace the small engravings with fingertips that leave no mark. Now and then, one looks up toward the doorway, watching the shadows shift as their parents move from room to room. The knowledge that they are not alone brings a quiet ease, a sense that all is as it should be. The father returns to the hallway, lifting the candle lantern from its hook. He carries it to the back door and peers out into the courtyard. The flagstones are dark with dew, the wooden gate latched and still. He steps out just far enough to draw the coal scuttle closer to the threshold. The handle is cold in his grip. He brings it in and sets it near the hearth, where it will be ready to replenish the fire in the morning. Before closing the door, he takes a moment to breathe the damp night air, the scent of earth and fallen leaves mingling with the faint sweetness of chimney smoke. Then he steps back inside, lowering the latch with a final satisfying click. The mother lifts the kettle from its hook and pours the last of the hot water into a small jug. She carries it upstairs, her footsteps slow, the lamp in her other hand casting gentle shapes along the walls. In the master bedroom, she sets the jug on the washstand beside a folded towel and a cake of soap. The jug's warmth drifts upward in a pale thread of steam, blending with the lavender sachet tucked behind the basin. She smooths the towel, adjusting its edge so that it hangs in a straight line. Back downstairs, the maid has finished tidying the kitchen. She glances around to be sure no utensil has been left out of place, no cloth left unfolded. Satisfied, she extinguishes the lamp above the table, leaving only the faint gleam of embers in the range. She moves to the back stair, the soft rustle of her skirts the last sound to stir the air. The father pauses at the threshold of the parlor, surveying the room with a thoughtful eye. The children look up at him, their faces calm in the candlelight. He crosses to the mantel and takes a small clock from its shelf, lifting it to his ear to be sure it still ticks. The sound is steady, the mechanism faithful. He returns it to its place and lowers himself into his chair, exhaling slowly. The day has narrowed to this quiet hour, and he is grateful for it. The mother descends the stairs, her step unhurried. She joins the children near the fire, lowering herself to the rug beside them. Her hand rests lightly on her daughter's shoulder. For a moment, none of them speak. They only sit in the hush, listening to the last rustlings of the house as it settles deeper into night. In these final errands, checking the latches, winding the clocks, folding the cloths, there is a kind of benediction. Each small act declares that the household is ready to rest, that nothing has been forgotten or left undone. The children lean into their mother's side, and she closes her eyes, allowing herself the first taste of the sleep that waits beyond these simple, sacred routines. The time has come to prepare the children for bed. Though the hour grows late, there is no hurry in the movements that follow. In this house, even the simplest rituals unfold at their own gentle pace, as though the very walls understand the importance of each moment. The bath water must be warmed, the night clothes laid out, the hair brushed smooth. Every step belongs to the slow surrender of day into night. In the kitchen, the maid lifts the kettle from its iron hook over the range. The water inside still steams faintly from supper, though it has cooled since it was last poured. She carries it to the scullery sink, where a second kettle waits, already filled. With practiced hands, she tips them together into a large enamel pitcher, testing the temperature with the back of her wrist. Satisfied, she nods once and sets the pitcher aside. Upstairs, the mother has drawn the curtains tight in the children's room. The fire in the grate has burned low, a gentle orange glow that brightens and fades in turns. On the small chest at the foot of each bed, a fresh nightgown has been laid out, soft white cotton with scalloped hems and buttons smoothed by many washings. Folded towels rest beside them, still scented faintly with lavender and the sunshine in which they dried only yesterday. The children stand near the washstand, their hands clasped in front of them, watching the preparations with solemn attention. They are not yet truly sleepy, but the warmth of the room and the hush of the hour have quieted their voices. Even their curiosity comes in small, soft questions. Will the kettle be hot? May I use the blue towel tonight? Each answer is given in the same even tone, never rushed, never sharp. There is no need for haste. The night has already claimed them. When the maid enters carrying the pitcher, the children step back without being told. She pours the warm water into the porcelain basin, the steam rising in a delicate plume. The mother tests the heat once more before dipping a folded cloth into the basin and wringing it out. The cloth unfurls like a white flag of surrender to sleep. She kneels before the youngest child, brushing the damp fabric gently along her cheeks, behind her ears, across the soft curve of her neck. The child closes her eyes, leaning into the touch as though it were a promise. The washing continues in silence. Each child steps forward in turn, eyes half lowered, faces solemn in the candlelight. Hands are washed, fingers splayed wide to let the warmth reach between them. A small bar of soap is turned over in their palms, until a faint lather forms, then rinsed away with fresh water from the jug. The towels are held ready, enfolding each child in a brief cocoon of softness. When the cloth is lifted from their hair, it leaves behind a faint halo of dampness and the clean scent of lavender. At the dressing table, the mother lifts the hairbrush. Its handle is worn smooth where her fingers have rested night after night, year after year. She draws it slowly through each child's hair, working from crown to nape in patient strokes. The bristles catch now and then in a tangle, but she never pulls or scolds. Instead, she eases the knots free with her fingers, her touch as unhurried as her voice. The children stand perfectly still, their gaze fixed on the little clock on the mantel, watching its hands advance by degrees that seem almost too small to notice. When the last brush stroke is finished, the hair gleams in the lamplight, parted neatly down the middle. The mother sets the brush aside, smoothing each small head in turn with her palm. The children turn to lift their arms, allowing her to slip the nightgowns over them, guiding their hands through the sleeves. The fabric falls in gentle folds to their ankles, the scalloped hems brushing against bare feet. In this soft uniform of rest, they seem smaller, more tender than they did only an hour ago when supper was still being served. The maid gathers the towels and washcloths, folding them into a neat bundle to be taken away. She does not speak, only nods once when the mother murmurs her thanks. As she leaves the room, her footsteps fade quickly along the corridor, swallowed by the deeper hush that comes when all necessary work has been done. The children shift from foot to foot, their eyes heavy now, their breaths slower. The mother lifts the small oil lamp from the dressing table, carrying it to each bedside in turn. She sets it on the nightstand while she turns back the covers, smoothing the sheets with her palm. The pillows are fluffed, their linen cases faintly cool to the touch. When she finishes, she straightens, her hands folded against her apron as she surveys the room. Nothing remains undone. She beckons the children closer. One by one they climb onto the beds, knees sinking into the feather mattress, shoulders relaxing as they lie back. She draws the covers up to their chins, tucking them in with the same care she might use to wrap a delicate parcel. Each child is kissed lightly on the brow. A hand lingers on a cheek. A whispered endearment is offered, though none of them will remember the words in the morning. What matters is the tone, the reassurance it carries. For a moment, no one moves. The fire in the grate flares softly as a coal shifts, sending a fresh glow into the quiet. The mother stands between the beds, the lamplight hailing her figure. The children's eyes drift shut, only to open again after a long pause, as if they mean to hold on to this moment as long as they can. At last, their breathing evens, their small bodies yielding to the comfort that has been prepared for them. She lowers the lamp's wick until the flame becomes a slender thread, barely illuminating the outlines of the room. Then she turns to leave, pausing in the doorway to look back. The hush has deepened into something almost sacred. The last flicker of lamplight catches in her hair, then dies away as she closes the door with a soft click, leaving behind only the whisper of breathing and the slow exhale of embers cooling in the hearth. The children's room has grown still, their dreams slowly gathering in the warmth beneath their quilts. Along the hallway, the hush is so complete that every small sound seems magnified. A creak of the stair, the quiet tick of the little clock on the landing, the soft rustle of fabric as the mother closes the bedroom door. She carries the lamp with her, the flame steady within its glass chimney. Its light glides ahead of her across the wallpaper, illuminating the pale sprays of flowers, the edges of framed lithographs. The air holds the mingled scents of the evening, lavender from the linens, the faint sweetness of soap, the drowsy ember smell of coal resting in the hearths. In this calm, even the darkness feels kindly, pressing close in a way that seems protective rather than threatening. The master bedroom waits with its door ajar, the fire banked low in the grate. The coals glow a deep orange, their heat a presence more felt than seen. A brass warming pan leans against the hearth, the polished curve catching the lamplight in a single burnished arc. Along the mantel, a row of small ornaments, porcelain animals, a miniature clock, a faded sprig of dried heather, stand in quiet witness to the closing of the day. The father is also already there, seated in the broad upholstered chair near the hearth. His boots have been set aside, his slippers pulled on in their place. He holds a small book in his lap, though he is not reading. Instead, he gazes at the fire, his thoughts turned inward in that slow, drifting way that comes only when the day's work is truly done. At the sound of his wife's step, he lifts his head, offering a faint smile that seems to require no words. She sets the lamp on the dressing table, adjusting the wick so the flame settles into a quiet brightness. Beside it, the pitcher of warm water waits, a curl of steam still rising from its spout. A folded towel rests nearby, its linen smooth and cool to the touch. She brushes her fingers over the towel's edge, then turns to the wardrobe, her motions unhurried. The door opens on neatly arranged garments. She draws out her nightdress, lifting it with both hands so the fine cotton does not crease. The fabric is soft from countless launderings, its tiny pin tucks and lace insets showing the patient work of seamstress hands. She drapes it across the foot of the bed, then returns for her wrapper, a garment lighter than a dressing gown, but warm enough to ward off the evening's chill. She unpins her hair, laying each hairpin carefully in the small china dish on the dressing table. One by one, the long coils fall free, dark and shining in the lamplight. She draws a comb through them, each stroke slow and measured. The teeth of the comb make a delicate whisper as they pass through, and for a time, that sound is the only movement in the room. The father watches. Though his gaze is soft with weariness, his body already leaning deeper into the chair's embrace. When her hair lies smooth over her shoulders, she sets the comb aside and turns to the washstand. The warm water is poured into the basin with a quiet splash, the steam rising in a fragrant wave. She dips the cloth and wrings it out, pressing it to her face and neck. The warmth soothes the faint strain that lingers behind her eyes, easing the last remnants of the day's demands. She dries her skin, each motion deliberate, each fold of the towel an act of gentle care. She changes without haste, folding her day dress over her arm and slipping into the nightdress with practiced ease. The cotton falls in graceful folds, settling against her skin in a familiar embrace. She ties the ribbons at the throat and cuffs, her fingers pausing on the last knot as though reluctant to break the moment's stillness. The wrapper follows, wrapped snug around her and fastened with its sash. At last, she is ready to leave the day behind. The father sets aside his book, rising with the careful deliberation of a man who has been sitting too long. He crosses to the washstand, rinsing his hands and face in the remaining warm water. The chill that settles afterward is clean, almost bracing. reminding him that the world beyond the curtains has grown colder while they prepared for bed. He dries his skin and folds the towel in half before placing it back in its accustomed spot. Together, they move to the bed. The covers have already been turned down, the linen sheets smooth and faintly cool. Each side of the bed holds its own familiar impression, shaped by years of nightly rest. The pillows are plump, the quilt heavy, with the quiet promise of warmth. The father bends to stir the coals in the hearth, coaxing a final glow to keep the room temperate through the long hours of darkness. The mother stands for a moment beside the mantel, her hand resting on the edge. She watches the small flare of flame as it catches in the coal, listens to the soft crackle that follows. There is comfort in this last tending of the fire, in the knowledge that everything has been made ready, nothing overlooked. At last, she lifts the lamp and lowers the wick. The flame dwindles, drawing itself into a small, flickering heart before it gutters out. The darkness that settles afterward is deep, but never empty. The embers in the grate pulse with a slow, rhythmic light, illuminating the room in gentle intervals. They slip beneath the covers, the quilt folding over them with its familiar weight. In the hush, they lie still, their breathing the only sound. Now and then, a coal shifts in the grate, sending a fresh thread of warmth into the air. The father's hand finds hers beneath the quilt, their fingers curling together in the darkness. No words pass between them, for none are needed. The day has ended, the house is at rest, and in this quiet embrace, sleep begins its patient approach. The fire is the last guardian of the night. Its glow fills the darkened bedroom with a living warmth, casting slow, undulating patterns along the walls. Each movement of the flame is measured and gentle, like a breath drawn and released over and over. In that glow, the familiar outlines of the room take on a softened clarity. The curve of the armchair by the hearth, the silhouette of the washstand pitcher, the faint gleam of brass buttons on the father's discarded waistcoat. The coal has burned low but steady, reduced to a cradle of embers that still hold the day's stored heat. Now and then, a coal will settle with a small sigh, sending a brief flare of brightness into the shadows. It is enough to see by, though no one here needs to see much anymore. The hour has passed for tasks and errands. What remains is the slow loosening of wakefulness, the quiet preparation for surrendering to sleep. The mother lies still, her eyes half closed as she watches the fires dance. Her breathing has slowed to the measured rhythm that marks the body's readiness to rest, but her thoughts still hover in the soft space between day and night. She thinks of small things, the sound of the children's laughter as they carried their books upstairs, the precise way her fingers tied the last ribbon of her nightdress, the hush that settled over the kitchen when the final lamp was turned down. These memories are not burdens but comforts, small proofs that the day was lived carefully, that nothing was left undone. The father shifts beside her, the mattress giving a muted creak in response. He draws in a slow breath, then lets it out with a sigh that seems to carry the last of his wakeful thoughts. His hand finds hers beneath the covers again, and though neither speaks, the warmth of that touch is its own kind of conversation. They have passed countless nights this way, each as precious in its quiet sameness as the next. The fire burns lower still, and for a time, the room darkens so completely that the embers seem to float in the air like small patient stars. Each glow is a promise that the heat remains, that the night will not grow so cold it cannot be borne. The hush is profound, so complete that the house itself seems to be listening. From beyond the walls, no sound intrudes. The street outside is empty. The last passers-by long since turned in. The lamplight beyond the curtains has diminished to a pale glow that scarcely touches the sill. In that darkness, the mind drifts easily. The mother feels her thoughts sliding into the soft indistinction of near sleep, where memories and imaginings blend without effort. She sees the children's faces, peaceful in their beds, and feels the same gratitude she has felt each evening since the first was laid in her arms. She remembers the day's quiet triumphs, a well-mended hem, a letter folded and sealed, a supper prepared without fuss. Each recollection is a small balm against the uncertainties of the wider world. The father, too, feels the approach of rest. His breathing deepens, and though his eyes remain open, they no longer fix on any one thing. Instead, they roam the fire's last movements, the tiny shifts of red and gold within the grate. He recalls the steady passage of hours, the comforting routines that shape the day, the winding of the clock, the weighing of the coal, the measured laying of the supper table. All of it seems now like a single continuous gesture, one long motion toward this moment of repose. He stirs once more, leaning slightly to lift the small poker from its stand. With the gentlest touch, he nudges the coal into a tighter mound, preserving the heat that will linger through the hours to come. The movement is careful, almost reverent. When he sets the poker back in place, the sound is a soft click, no louder than a closing eyelid. The embers brighten briefly, then settle into a steady, watchful glow. The mother's eyelids flutter closed, her hand relaxing against his. In her mind, the fire's warmth becomes an echo of all the tender things she has gathered in this house. The sweetness of children's voices, the touch of linen against skin, the hush of dawn when the first light finds the window glass. Each thought drifts away in turn, replaced by the deeper quiet that waits beyond them. The father lets his gaze rest on the dying fire. He has never minded the dark. In the darkness, he feels a kind of relief, an easing of all that must be maintained in daylight. Here, nothing is demanded. No decisions, no instructions, only the soft breathing of his wife beside him, and the certainty that the house has settled as it should. He closes his eyes, and the glow behind his eyelids pulses like a memory of warmth, a final reassurance that sleep can come without fear. In the hearth, the last bright flame withdraws, leaving behind the low red heart of the embers. The room is nearly black now, save for that patient glow. It is enough to know the fire is there, holding the cold at bay, watching over the two of them as they drift closer to slumber. When the last of the warmth is spent, the coals will give way to darkness. But even then, the house itself will keep its vigil, its walls as steadfast in the night as they were in the day. And so they lie together, their breathing matched in slow rhythm, their thoughts dissolving into the darkness. No further preparations are needed. The fire has done its work. The house has kept its promises, and sleep at last begins to claim its due. The night stretches long and gentle ahead, and in its shelter they surrender, trusting that the morning will find them as it always does, safe, warm, and ready to begin again. Upstairs in the children's room, the hush has grown so complete that even the small fire in the grate seems to burn more softly, as though it too feels the nearness of sleep. The lamplight is low, a single flame flickering behind the curved glass chimney. In that circle of quiet, the children lie beneath their quilts, faces turned toward the sound of their mother's voice. She sits in the narrow wooden chair placed between the beds, the old storybook resting open in her lap. Its cloth cover is worn thin at the edges, the lettering faded to a ghostly imprint of guilt. She holds the page delicately, her finger following each line as she reads in her softest voice, careful not to break the fragile calm that has settled over them all. The words are familiar, repeated so many times that the children could recite them by heart. But tonight, as on every night, they listen as though hearing the tale for the first time. The story drifts through the room like a lullaby, a gentle adventure, free of any real danger, filled with images of green fields and bright skies, small animals who speak in kind voices, doors that open onto safe harbors. As she reads, the children's breathing slows, their eyes half closing. Each sentence seems to settle them further into their beds, their bodies growing heavy with the sweetness of drowsy contentment. Now and then, the mother pauses to turn a page, her fingertips smoothing the thin leaf before she continues. In the silence between paragraphs, the fire shifts, sending a small glow across the floorboards. The youngest child lifts her head for a moment, peering toward the hearth as though to be sure the warmth is still there. When she sees the embers holding steady, she lets her head sink back to the pillow, her lashes drifting down again. The father stands in the doorway, leaning lightly against the frame. He does not speak. His eyes move from one small figure to the next, lingering on each face in turn. In the lamplight, he sees how their features still echo, the babies they once were. The curve of a cheek, the softness of a jaw, the faint crease between brows when dreams begin to form. He knows that soon they will grow, that the day will come when bedtime stories are set aside. But tonight, they are still small, still gathered in this quiet room, still trusting that no harm can reach them here. The story comes to its final lines, the last words spoken so gently, they seem to melt into the hush. The mother closes the book, resting her palm on the cover for a moment. She lifts her gaze, meeting her husband's eyes across the space between the beds. In that look is the shared understanding of countless evenings, the knowledge that these rituals are as much for themselves as for the children. Intending to this quiet, they have built something lasting, a harbour against the years to come. She sets the book on the table, its worn spine settling against the lamp base. The children stir, shifting beneath the quilt. One small voice rises, barely above a whisper. "Will you say the prayer, Mama?" The mother smiles, brushing a lock of hair from the speaker's forehead. "Of course," she murmurs, her voice as soft as the sigh of the cooling embers. She folds her hands in her lap, closing her eyes. The children do the same, their faces turned up toward her, eyelids fluttering shut. The father bows his head where he stands, the lamplight catching on the crown of his hair. For a moment, the room feels suspended in time, held still by the gentle gravity of the ritual. Her voice begins, low and measured, reciting words learned long ago, passed down through generations. Each line is a petition for peace, for safety through the night, for the blessing of the morning to come. The children join in on the final sentences, their voices small but certain. The sound is like a thread woven through the quiet, a delicate bond tying them all to the comfort of something older and deeper than themselves. When the prayer ends, no one moves immediately. The hush that follows feels as necessary as the words themselves. At last, the mother lifts her head, her gaze tender as she looks from one child to the next. "Sleep well," she whispers, smoothing the quilt over their shoulders. "God keep you safe till morning." She rises from the chair and crosses to the hearth. With the small iron poker, she adjusts the coal, ensuring the warmth will last through the hours ahead. The embers brighten, sending a soft, pulsing light across the room. She returns the poker to its stand, wiping her hand on her apron. Her movements are quiet, unhurried. Nothing in this moment can be rushed. The father steps closer, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Together, they look down at the beds, watching the children sink deeper into the first stages of sleep. Already their breathing has grown steady and slow. One child's hand curls beneath her chin. Another's mouth softens into the faintest smile. Whatever small anxieties lingered in the day have dissolved here, replaced by the peace that comes when night is welcomed without fear. The mother lifts the lamp, turning the wick until the flame dims to a pale glimmer. Shadows deepen along the walls, softening the edges of the familiar furniture. The final light rests on the children's faces, catching in the curve of a cheek, the flutter of lashes as dreams begin to take hold. Then, with a last look, she lowers the wick again. The flame shrinks into a bright dot, then disappears, leaving only the hush and the patient breathing of sleep. They step into the hall, closing the door behind them with a soft click. In that darkness, the children lie wrapped in their dreams, watched over by the slow heartbeat of the embers and the certainty that they are loved. And in the hallway, the parents pause, letting the hush settle over them, feeling the small sweet ache of gratitude for this hour, for this peace, for the gift of one more night spent together in such gentle company. The door to the children's room closes with the faintest catch of the latch, leaving the hush undisturbed. In that darkened space, the fire continues its slow breathing, sending small wavering shadows across the ceiling beams. The children have turned onto their sides beneath the quilts, each finding the position that feels most like home. Their faces are half hidden in the folds of linen, cheeks flushed by the warmth of the embers, lashes lying still on skin as pale as candle wax. The mother stands in the hall for a moment, one hand resting on the doorframe. Though she cannot see them now, she knows every detail of the room she has left behind. The embroidered sampler that hangs above the fireplace, the shelf with its neat row of picture books, the small shoes lined up by the wardrobe, each pair set carefully in its place. Those small signs of order are as comforting to her as the prayer she has just spoken. They are evidence that the children's world is secure, that nothing has been left undone. At her side, the father lifts the lamp, turning its light down until it is no more than a modest glow. In the hush, their footfalls are muffled by the carpet runner as they cross the landing. A draught stirs the fringe of the curtains in the hallway window, carrying with it the faintest breath of night air. The scent of the world beyond the glass, cold, damp, a little like iron, seeps into the warm interior, but only for a moment before it is gone again, replaced by the familiar perfume of soap and coal. They step into the master bedroom, closing the door behind them. The fire there has burned down to a red heart, pulsing quietly in the grate. Its glow gleams along the brass bedstead and the porcelain knobs of the washstand, each reflection a soft promise that the dark has no power here. In this small circle of warmth, the last motions of the day unfold as naturally as breathing. The father sets a lamp on the bedside table and checks the small clock that rests beside it. The hands have nearly met at 10, their progress measured and inevitable. He winds the key with slow turns, listening to the tiny ratchet of the gears. Each click is a comfort, proof that the hours will be counted through the night, even as the household lies still. When the winding is finished, he closes the clocks back with a soft snap, setting it gently in its place. The mother crosses to the wardrobe. She lifts a wrapper from the hook and folds it over her arm, smoothing the collar where it has creased. With her other hand, she adjusts the pillow, plumping it to just the right height. The simple acts of preparation have become a liturgy all their own, one she repeats each night with the same quiet devotion. Nothing is hurried. Nothing is done without care. In the children's room, the embers glow on. One of the children sighs in her sleep, turning beneath the quilt so that her hand slips free and rests on the coverlet. The firelight touches her knuckles, catching on the fine line of a scar earned in some forgotten tumble. She does not wake. The hush is too deep, too complete, to be broken by such small movements. The rhythm of her breathing resumes, a slow and steady tide that carries her deeper into the world of dreams. The father steps to the window, parting the curtain just enough to look into the street below. The gas lamps are burning in their rows, each enclosed in a glass globe that tames the flame to a mild, steady glow. The cobblestones shine faintly where the evening's mist has settled. Beyond the light, the darkness thickens into a quiet that feels almost holy. No footsteps disturb the silence now. The city itself seems to have joined the household in rest. He lets the curtain fall back into place and turns to face the room. The mother has slipped beneath the covers, her hand resting on the folded edge of the quilt. Her eyes are open, watching him with a tenderness that needs no words. He moves to her side of the bed and leans down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The gesture is small, familiar, but in it is the whole story of their days. Years of quiet understanding, of shared work and shared comfort, of all the evenings spent in just this way. He crosses to his side and sits, drawing off his slippers and setting them in their place beneath the chair. The floorboards creak under his weight. Then still again. He folds back the quilt and lowers himself onto the mattress, feeling the day's last tension ease from his shoulders as he does. For a moment, they lie in silence, the fire's glow marking the slow measure of their breaths. In the room next door, the children have settled into the deep, dreamless sleep that comes when all is well. The mother's voice, the story, the prayer. These have woven a net of safety around them as surely as the quilt that covers their small bodies. In their dreams, they walk in sunlit meadows, hear the call of skylarks, feel the warmth of a hand held fast in their own. No shadows cross their sleep. The mother turns to her husband, her voice no louder than a whisper. "Shall I close the lamp?" He nods, the movement barely perceptible. She lifts the small brass knob, lowering the wick until the flame contracts, its light shrinking into a single, steady point. As she turns it further, the glow fades, leaving only the fire's pulsing heart to illuminate the room. The darkness that follows is not a thing to be feared but embraced, a quiet that welcomes rest rather than denying it. The father draws the quilt higher, feeling the warmth gather around them. The last thoughts of the day drift away, leaving behind a soft awareness of breath of the slow, contented beating of his heart. He reaches for her hand, finds it in the dark, and lets his thumb rest against the smoothness of her knuckles. In the quiet house, nothing stirs. The embers keep their watch. The clocks tick on. The children sleep in their nests of linen and wool. Outside, the lamplight guards the silent street. And here, in this darkened room, the two of them surrender to sleep at last, trusting that the dawn will find them, as it always does, together and safe in the hush they have made. The darkness in the master bedroom is deep now, broken only by the slow breathing of the fire in the grate. Its glow wavers along the brass bedstead, touches the curve of the water pitcher on the washstand, and sinks into the polished wood of the wardrobe. The flame's reflections drift across the ceiling like the last embers of a dying day. In that hush, the mother and father lie still, their breathing matched, the quilt drawn close around their shoulders. For a while, neither moves. The mother feels the warmth of her husband's hand where it rests over hers beneath the coverlet. The small weight of that gesture, an anchor in the darkness. Her eyes are closed, but her mind lingers on the hours that have brought them here. She thinks of the children, their faces soft with sleep, their dreams as bright and untroubled as the mornings that follow each night. She thinks of the quiet rituals she has repeated for so many years, folding the blankets, turning the lamp wick, smoothing the sheets. In each of those actions, she finds a promise that tomorrow will be much the same, that peace is made in small, steady choices. The father's thoughts drift more slowly. He listens to the faint crackle of the embers, to the slow tick of the little clock on the mantel, to the breathing of the woman beside him. He has learned to find comfort in this measured quiet. When he was young, the night used to feel too vast, too empty to hold without unease. But over time, he has discovered that darkness is nothing to be feared when it is filled with the known, the cherished, the trusted. He shifts slightly, feeling the mattress yield beneath him, and closes his eyes more fully. The fire sighs in the grate. One coal breaks into two with a soft crack that seems loud in the hush. A thin thread of flame curls upward before subsiding again, leaving only the low, steady glow. The shadows stir and resettle. In that moment, the mother opens her eyes and lifts her gaze to the ceiling. She studies the flickering patterns cast there, the delicate dance of light and shadow that repeats itself each evening when the embers burn low. She has watched this same play of shapes for years, never once finding it dull. In its slow, predictable beauty, she finds reassurance that the world is not always in motion. Some things remain. She turns her head slightly, looking across the dark at her husband's profile. In the soft glow, she can see the line of his jaw, the gentle slope of his nose, the way his hair falls against his temple. She knows these details as well as she knows her own hands, and she treasures them all the more for their familiarity. Her heart moves with a quiet gratitude that they have reached this point in the day and in their lives together. He feels her gaze and opens his eyes. Their eyes meet across the dim space, and for a moment, the hush seems to deepen even further, as though the fire itself holds its breath. No words pass between them. None are needed. In that silent exchange, they say all that matters, that they are here, that they are safe, that whatever uncertainties the world may hold beyond these walls, this bed, this warmth, will always be theirs to share. She closes her eyes again, her breathing settling into the same slow rhythm she has kept since the children were infants. He watches her a moment longer, then lets his gaze drift toward the window. Though the curtain is drawn, he imagines the night beyond it, the empty street bathed in the lamplight's glow, the rooftops dark and still, the vast sky pressing gently over everything. It does not feel so large tonight. Instead, it seems to have gathered itself around their home, wrapping it in a quiet that is protective rather than lonely. The last coal in the grate crumbles, sending up a small flare of orange light. It touches the foot of the bed, glancing off the brass rails before dying back into the embers. The father closes his eyes and lets his mind drift across the familiar landscape of memory. Faces of loved ones, rooms he has known, mornings that have followed nights, just like this one. Each thought is like a small smooth stone turned over in his hand. Eventually, they slip away, replaced by the soft darkness that signals the nearness of sleep. Beside him, the mother shifts a little, her shoulder brushing his. He turns his hand so that their palms meet beneath the quilt. Her fingers curl around his with the same quiet certainty she has offered him for so many years. The pressure is light, but it is enough to say, "I am here. I am with you. All is well." For a while longer, they remain in that shared stillness, neither fully awake nor fully asleep. The house has settled into its deepest quiet. The children's dreams unfold behind closed doors. The clocks keep their patient count of hours. Even the wind has subsided, leaving the night smooth and undisturbed. The only movement is the slow rise and fall of their breathing, and the fading pulse of the embers in the grate. At last, the mother feels her thoughts grow lighter, dissolving into the soft darkness behind her eyelids. She draws in a slow breath, tasting the last warmth of the fire. As she exhales, her body yields to the pull of rest. The father senses her release and lets go of his own last fragment of wakefulness. The hush grows deeper until it is complete. In this room, nothing more is needed. The day has given all it had to give. The night has received it with grace. And here, in this small, beloved space, they surrender to sleep at last, certain that dawn will come in its time, bringing with it another day of small, precious certainties. The hush that fills the house has deepened into something more than quiet. It is a stillness that feels almost alive, a tender presence that breathes in time with the last coals in the grate and the slow, even rhythm of sleeping hearts. The walls seem to hold that quiet as carefully as they hold the heat of the day, keeping it close against the chill that presses gently from the darkened street outside. In the master bedroom, the embers have grown dimmer. Their glow no longer spills across the floor in flickering patches, but lies confined to a small cradle of red. Even so, that small heat is enough to keep the cold at bay. It is a soft, companionable warmth, content to fade slowly, rather than vanish all at once. From the bed, the father's breathing comes steady and deep, a slow tide that rises and falls in the darkness. The mother's breath is lighter, but just as calm, a soft accompaniment to the last murmurs of the fire. Beyond the door, the corridor stretches quiet and unlit. The little clock on the landing marks the time with a patient tick. Its measured counting unchanged whether the house is bustling with voices or sunk in this gentle hush. The pendulum swings behind its glass, each movement like a nod of understanding, that all things must move forward, but some hours are meant only for rest. Downstairs, the parlor has slipped fully into darkness. The curtains hang closed over the windows, the folds of heavy fabric motionless in the still air. The chairs stand empty around the hearth, their cushions bearing the faint indentations of the bodies that rested there only an hour ago. The coal scuttle waits by the grate, its lid close. In the quiet, the memory of warmth seems almost tangible, as though the walls themselves have absorbed the evening's ease and will hold it until morning. The kitchen is the coldest room of all. The range has cooled, the last gleam of fire hidden behind the closed iron door. The long oaked table has been cleared of supper dishes, wiped clean and left to the dark. The kettle sits beside the sink, its surface dulled by the absence of flame. In that stillness, even the faint scents that linger, soap, flour, a trace of coal smoke, seem subdued, as though reluctant to disturb the peace. From time to time, a faint sound rises in the hush, a creak of settling timber, the muted rattle of a pane stirred by the night air. These small noises are not intrusions, but reminders that the house is not a lifeless thing. It has its own quiet life, its own slow rhythms that continue long after human footsteps have stilled. The walls breathe out the last of the day's warmth. The floorboards ease their tension, and the air settles into its final calm. Upstairs, in the children's room, the small fire has nearly burned itself to ash. A single coal glows softly, brightening and dimming in an unhurried pulse. In its light, the quilts rise and fall over sleeping bodies. The children lie as they have for hours, turn toward their dreams with the trust that only comes when the world feels safe and predictable. A small hand curls over the edge of the quilt, its fingers slack in sleep. Now and then, a sigh escapes, a soft exhalation that seems too delicate to carry beyond the edge of the pillow. In the master bedroom, the mother stirs, her eyes open halfway, though she does not lift her head from the pillow. For a moment, she only listens. She hears the breathing beside her, the last faint whisper of the embers in the grate, the steady ticking of the clock down the hall. Each sound is a reassurance. Each tells her that all is as it should be. She closes her eyes again, the quiet settling around her like another layer of warmth. The father does not wake. His dreams are as untroubled as the darkness that enfolds him. If he were to open his eyes, he would see nothing but the dim gleam of brass, where the firelight catches the bedstead, the small circle of reflected light in the glass of the clock. But he does not need to see. He has learned that in this hour trust is enough. Trust that the house will hold them, that the night will pass without incident, that the morning will come in its time. Outside, the street is empty. The lamplighter's rounds are long since complete, each flame housed behind its glass globe, burning with the same steady patience as the fire that now dwindles in the grate. The gas lamps cast small circles of light onto the cobblestones, marking the boundaries of the darkness but never fully conquering it. Beyond their glow, the city sleeps, the rooftops black against the starless sky. Now and then, a breeze stirs the curtains, pressing the fabric inward before releasing it again. The cold that slips through that narrow gap is brief, soon overtaken by the house's stored warmth. In the children's room, the coal brightens one last time before collapsing into a drift of grey ash. Even that small glow is enough to keep the shadows gentle. Downstairs, the long case clock in the hallway chimes the hour. The sound rises slowly, note by note, filling the hush with its measured solemnity. 12 strokes, each fading into silence before the next begins. The last chime lingers longer than the others, hanging in the air like a benediction. When it finally dissolves, the quiet returns, deeper than before, In that moment, the house feels as though it is holding its breath. Every object, every chair, every folded blanket, every cup set carefully on a shelf seems to share in that pause. The quiet is complete. Nothing moves. Nothing speaks. Only the soft breathing of the sleepers gives proof that life persists in this tender darkness. At last, the night continues its slow passage. The quiet does not break. It deepens, becoming the kind of hush that can only be felt rather than heard. The house, relieved of its daylight burdens, settles into its final stillness. And in that perfect calm, the family rests, their dreams sheltered by walls that have known many nights, each as soft and necessary as this one. Outside the house, midnight has gathered itself into a quiet so complete that even the city seems to have yielded to it. The narrow street lies empty under the pale, watchful glow of the gas lamps. Their glass globes gleam softly, halos of light, spreading across the cobblestones, tracing each seam between the stones in delicate lines of gold. Between those circles of radiance, the shadows are deep and patient, filling the gaps where no flame can reach. The air carries the damp chill of early hours, a cold that has settled gently rather than arrived with any force. It slips beneath doors, drifts through keyholes, presses its cool hands against the panes. The window glass fogs faintly from the warmth within, a fine mist that blooms and fades with the slow rhythm of the house's breathing. Further down the row of terraced homes, a solitary figure moves in the lamplight, a night watchman making his final rounds. His lantern swings in a slow arc at his side, its flame barely brighter than the lamps themselves. Each step is measured, unhurried, the tread of a man who has known many midnights. Now and then he pauses to glance at a latch or test the handle of a gate, ensuring that the city's boundaries remain intact. His keyring rattles softly against his coat as he moves on, disappearing into the deeper shadows between the pools of light. Near the corner, a cat emerges from an alley, its coat grey as the paving stones. It pauses in the circle of lamplight, head lifted, ears turned to catch the slightest disturbance. But there is no disturbance to find. The world is as hushed as a held breath. Satisfied, it moves on in silence, the soft pads of its feet leaving no trace. Inside the house, the hush remains unbroken. The fire in the master bedroom has burned itself nearly to ash, a final coal gleaming like a buried ember. Its glow does not reach far, but it does not need to. The warmth it once offered has seeped into the quilts and walls, a memory that lingers even as the flame recedes. In that darkness, the mother and father lie in easy stillness, their bodies turned toward each other under the weight of the quilt. Their breathing has grown so even that it is almost a single sound, rising and falling in unison. On the landing, the small clock keeps its patient tally of the passing hours. Each tick is clear but never intrusive, a quiet declaration that time continues its steady course regardless of who watches. The brass pendulum swings in measured arcs, marking the night's slow progress. From the hallway below, the taller clock answers at each quarter, the chimes softened by distance until they sound less like bells and more like the memory of music. In the children's room, the hush is deeper still. The fire has died entirely, leaving the grate cold and dark. The air is cooler now, crisp enough that the children have drawn the quilts higher, burying their chins in the folds of linen. One has curled onto her side, her cheek pressed against the pillow, her hand resting near her mouth. The other lies on her back, hair spread like a dark fan across the ticking. Their dreams continue, untroubled by the change in the air. The darkness here is not threatening. It is an invitation to rest more deeply. Beyond the windows, the rooftops blend into the night sky, their outlines soften to a single silhouette. A low wind moves along the eaves, fluttering a loose tile before subsiding again. The sound is small, more a suggestion than a disturbance. Beneath that thin current of air, everything remains motionless. No carriage passes, no footstep strikes the stones. The hour belongs wholly to quiet things, to the slow cooling of brick and slate, to the soft accumulation of dew, to the unhurried dreaming of those who sleep behind the walls. The watchman turns the corner and is gone. His lantern's glow fades behind the row of houses, leaving the street to the lamplight alone. In his absence, the darkness seems to grow even softer, as though it has settled more comfortably into its appointed place. The cat, too, has vanished into the labyrinth of yards and alleys, returning to whatever warm hollow it calls its own. For a time, no living creature moves through the lane. The night has reached the depth of its stillness. Inside, the mother stirs in her sleep. Her hand slips free of the quilt, fingers brushing the sheet, before she draws them back into its warmth. Her breathing shifts, deepens, then steadies again. Whatever dream prompted that motion dissolves before it can fully form. The hush reasserts itself, wrapping her in the same tender quiet that fills every room. The father does not wake. His dreams are made of simpler things, fragments of memory, the soft weight of the quilt, the warmth that still clings to the place where her hand met his. If he were aware of any thought at all, it would be only the certainty that all is well. The world beyond the curtains may be vast and cold, but here, within the four walls, they have tended with such care. Nothing requires his vigilance. The children do not stir. Their dreams have carried them so far from this place that even the small noises of the settling house cannot reach them. If a coal were to break in the grate, or a shutter to rattle faintly in the wind, it would pass unnoticed. The house itself seems to understand this, offering no sudden creaks or draughts, no intrusion that might recall them too soon to waking. And so the hour passes, unmarked by any change more dramatic than the slow drift of a shadow across a wall. Midnight yields to the first moments of morning, though no light yet rises to declare it. The clocks continue their measured counting, the last warmth of the embers seeps into the stones, and the street beyond the curtains remains as hushed as a chapel. In that depth of night, the family lies safe in their separate beds, united by the same slow breathing, the same trust that dawn will come in its own time. No word has been spoken for hours, none is needed. The quiet holds them all, as constant as the ticking of the clocks and the patient dark that shelters every dream. The hour has slipped past midnight, easing into the quietest stretch of the night, when time itself feels unhurried and forgiving. The street beyond the curtains remains empty, each gas lamp burning with a steady, watchful glow. Their small flames mark the edges of darkness without disturbing it, like respectful sentinels guarding a silence that has become complete. In the children's room, the cold has settled into the air. The grate is dark now, the last coal turned to pale ash. Yet beneath the quilts, there is warmth enough. The children's breathing has grown deeper, slower, the measured rhythm of bodies that have yielded fully to sleep. In their dreams, They drift far from the confines of the small familiar room. One dreams of a wide green field, sunlight pooling in the grass, the air bright with birdsong. The other dreams of a small white boat gliding down a quiet river, the water as smooth as polished glass. Neither will remember these visions when morning comes. They are gifts the night offers, without expectation of gratitude. Now and then, a muscle twitches, a hand shifts against a pillow, but these small movements do not trouble the hush. Instead, they seem to affirm it, the way a sigh affirms contentment or a drowsy murmur affirms the closeness of comfort. The room once filled with the low voices of bedtime stories and the gentle scuffle of slippers on floorboards holds nothing now but peace. Along the corridor, the little clock on the landing ticks on, each note measured and delicate. Its pendulum moves like a heartbeat, even and sure. The clock has marked so many nights like this one, each hour a quiet witness to the slow work of rest. When the family was young, it ticked through sleepless hours spent tending infants, through hushed vigils over fevers, through long, uncertain nights that eventually yielded to dawn. Tonight, its counting is more serene. No cries disturb the hush. No anxious footfalls pass beneath it. The house has earned this calm. In the master bedroom, the embers have died at last, leaving only a faint trace of heat along the grate. The darkness has grown richer, a gentle weight that settles over the bed, softening every shape. Yet even in this near total dark, nothing feels hidden or uncertain. The mother and father sleep side by side, their bodies curved toward each other, the quilt rising and falling with each slow breath. But sleep, though deep, is not always entirely unbroken. The mother stirs, her mind surfacing for a moment before slipping back into dreams. She does not open her eyes, but in that brief interval of wakefulness, she feels the hush pressing close around her, so complete that she could almost believe the house itself is asleep. A thought passes across her mind like a feather. The children are safe. The day is done. All is well. Then the thought is gone, and she sinks again into the quiet current of rest. The father does not stir. His dreams have softened into something less like story and more like sensation. The memory of the mattress giving under his weight, the cool linen against his cheek, the warmth of her hand resting lightly over his. These impressions blend and dissolve, leaving only the slow contentment that comes when nothing more is required of him. Outside the window, the breeze has stilled. The curtains hang motionless, their folds undisturbed by any draught. The night is clear and mild, the sky overhead a seamless dark. If a star shines beyond the cloudless black, it does so invisibly, its light too distant to trouble the hush below. Yet, its presence is part of the same quiet, the vast, indifferent peace of a world that has turned toward rest. The hours drift on, marked only by the slow progression of dreams and the measured counting of the clocks. In some deeper layer of sleep, the children turn in their beds. The quilt shifts, settling again over their shoulders. One draws in a long, contented breath and releases it with a sigh that seems almost to say, "I am safe here. I am known. I am loved." The darkness receives this small declaration and offers back the same promise. Dreams continue their patient unfolding. In the master bedroom, the mother's thoughts have slipped into a tender confusion of memory and imagination. She sees the children as they were years ago, small hands lifted to be held, soft voices calling in the darkness. She feels the weight of an infant against her shoulder, hears the fragile hush of a newborn's breathing. But these memories do not carry sadness. They rise in the quiet like blessings, reminders of how much has been given and received. For the father, the dreams are simpler still. The image of the hearth, the feel of the quilt's familiar weight, the knowledge that this house has sheltered him through every season of his life. In sleep, he senses the same unspoken gratitude that fills the hush, a gratitude so deep it requires no language at all. The little clock on the landing chimes the quarter hour, the notes so soft they seem almost imagined. When the final tone fades, the quiet returns, deeper than before. The house, relieved of the last remnants of day, rests in perfect stillness. Outside, the street remains unchanged. The lamplight glows on in its silent vigil, touching the edges of the cobblestones, outlining the curve of the curb. No footsteps disturb the night. No carriage rumbles past. Even the watchman has paused in his rounds, leaning for a moment against a gate to watch the darkness that lies beyond the lamp's embrace. The world has narrowed to this. An hour held in gentle suspense, a darkness that neither threatens nor demands. A hush that enfolds everything in its tender care. Within it, the family sleeps, their dreams carried on the same quiet current, their hearts beating in a slow, shared rhythm. And as the night wears on, the clocks continue their counting. Each tick a promise that morning will come when it is needed. No sooner and no later. The hours that follow slip by, almost without notice, carried on the same slow tide of dreams and steady breathing. The hush that has settled over the house remains unbroken, a presence so constant that it feels as though it must always have been there. Only the clocks mark the passage of time, their ticking patient and unhurried. Even their chimes sound gentler now, softened by the depth of night. In the children's room, the darkness has begun to ease, though no light yet touches the windows. The air carries a subtle change, a thinning of the cold, a quiet stirring as though the dawn is breathing just beyond the curtains. The children remain lost in sleep, their faces turned toward the pillows, the quilts rising and falling with the same measured rhythm. One has drifted onto her back, an arm thrown above her head in a gesture of perfect trust. The other has drawn her knees up beneath the covers, her breath coming in small, contented sighs. They are far away now, walking the private roads of dreams that no one else can follow. Down the hall, the master bedroom holds its own stillness. The last of the fire's warmth has faded from the hearth, leaving the grate cool and dark. Yet the air has not grown truly cold. It is the same quiet chill that settles over all things before morning. A hush that feels almost expectant. Beneath the quilt, the mother and father lie as they have all night. Their bodies turn slightly toward each other, their hands resting close together. Their sleep is deep, but no longer dreamless. It has softened into the final rest before waking, the place where thought dissolves into the simple awareness of breath and heartbeat. Outside the house, the street is unchanged in its stillness. The lamplight burns on, though its glow has grown pale in anticipation of the dawn. Each glass globe holds a flame that seems smaller now, no longer the master of the darkness, but the companion of a coming light. The rooftops are outlined in the first suggestion of grey. The hard edges of chimneys and eaves soften to a single gentle silhouette. No footstep breaks the hush, no cart rattles past the gate. The world has paused to listen. At last, the first thread of morning begins to weave itself into the dark. It is not sudden. No blaze of light, no trumpet of birdsong, only a slow lifting of the shadows, a tender brightening along the highest panes of the windows. The curtains, drawn tight through the long hours, pale by degrees until their folds are outlined in soft silver. Beyond them, the sky changes shade by shade, from black to slate to the faintest blue. In the children's room, a small shift announces the new hour. One child stirs, her face turning toward the window even in sleep, as though she senses the light gathering beyond the glass. Her hand curls against her cheek. Her breathing quickens for a moment, then slows again. She does not wake. The dawn is content to wait. The mother is the first to open her eyes. For a while, she lies very still, letting the new light seep into her awareness. She sees the pale outlines of the room emerging, the shape of the wardrobe, the smooth arc of the washstand's basin, the dark rectangle of the window. She feels the coolness of the air above the quilt, the warmth of her husband's hand where it rests against hers. No thought rises fully to meet her, only the slow, steady certainty that morning has come. Beside her, the father draws in a deeper breath, the kind that marks the transition from dreaming to waking. He does not speak. His eyes remain closed, but she knows by the way. His hand moves that he too is aware of the change. The hush has not left them. If anything, it has grown more profound in this moment of return, when sleep loosens its hold but has not yet fully released them. Slowly she sits up, bracing her hands against the edge of the mattress. The quilt slides into her lap, the air cool against her skin. She glances towards the window, noting the pale light that has begun to gather behind the curtain. Her heart lifts, as it does each morning, with the quiet gratitude that they have been given another day, another chance to do the small, necessary things that weave a life together, another day to set the table, to tend the fire, to speak the words that soften all uncertainty. The father opens his eyes, meeting her gaze across the bed. No words pass between them, but the look is enough. It says, "I am here. You are here. This is enough." Slowly, he pushes himself up, his feet finding the floor, the boards cool beneath his soles. He moves to the window and parts the curtain just enough to look out. The street lies silvered under the first light. The lamplight has grown pale and insubstantial, no longer needed. The rooftops gleam faintly with dew, each tile catching the dawn in a delicate glisten. The sky overhead is soft and cloudless, the promise of a clear day. He lets the curtain fall back into place and turns toward his wife, nodding once. It is morning. In the children's room, the first true gleam of daylight filters through the thin space between curtain and sill. It slides across the quilt, catching in the pale strands of hair that lie scattered over the pillow. One child lifts her head without opening her eyes, then lets it fall again. Even in sleep, she has recognized the change, the small stirring of life that comes with the return of the sun. The mother rises, drawing her wrapper around her shoulders. She crosses to the hearth, where the grate stands cold. Soon she will lay a new fire, coaxing warmth into the chill that remains. She pauses for a moment, her hand resting on the mantel, feeling the smoothness of the wood beneath her palm. In that pause is all the gratitude of a woman who has watched the dark pass gently, who has seen the hush unfold and then give way to light. The father moves to her side, his hand brushing hers in a gesture so familiar that it feels like part of the morning itself. Together, They stand in the grey dawn, listening to the silence as it loosens, as the first sounds of day begin to form. A sparrow stirring under the eaves, a distant wheel turning on the cobbles, a child's breath quickening toward waking. The hush will lift by degrees. The house will fill again with voices and footsteps and the soft percussion of daily tasks. But for this last moment, it remains a place of perfect quiet, holding the peace of the night just a little longer. And in that final hush, the family wakes to the promise of morning, safe, together, and ready to begin again.